Welcome to the second part of the Excel feature tutorial. So in this part I'm going to show how to replicate the component that we did in the first part using points on a curve, and I'm going to introduce how to load the GC Excel feature because it's not loaded, and I'm going to show how to create points in a line using a different way. So the first thing that I'm going to do is let's save this file in one folder that we can recognize where is it. The reason that I'm doing that is because we have to save this in the same file, in the same folder, the DGN file that we're creating inside GenerativeComponents and the file that we're going to create in Excel. So let's go and save it. I save it in my desktop. I have a folder already there, but I recommend you guys to do that. And just save it wherever you want to do it. Yes. Okay. Okay. Now that I have my file in a location that I know where is it, let's move on and let's populate that component. So the first thing that I'm going to do is place one point, and I'm going to use the sine and cosine function to replicate that point and have multiple points and create a beautiful curve with a very simple script. So in the x coordinate, I'm going to use the function cosine, so I have to type this, and then I'm going to use the function series, and I want to create a point between 0 and 360 every 10 units. Sorry. And I'm going to copy this. I'm going to hit OK. In y coordinates, the thing that I want to do is I only want to use the function series, and I have to use the same values that I use in the x translation. So let's just type between 0 360 every 10 units. Let's hit OK. In the C translation, I'm going to use I'm going to paste the function that I use in x translation, but instead of using cosine, I'm going to use sine. But I have to type sin. Okay, so I just hit OK and I hit apply. So now one thing that I didn't do is I need to multiply these values for 20. Let's just use is a factor so we can see really the curves, and I'm going to do the same in Z. So now I see it. Now we have our first point that is creating our curve. So the next thing that I'm going to do is just I'm going to create a copy, and I'm going to change this value in x translation, and instead of using cosine, I'm going to use minus cosine. And that's all that I want to do. I'm going to hit OK, and I'm going to hit OK. So now I have my two curves, which I'm going to use to replicate that point. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create a curve. So let's save these transactions and let's rename these 2 points. I always forget to do it, sorry. But let's call it this one PT1 and this PT2. Let's hit OK. Now we have it. So let's create our curves. So let's go create new feature. Let's create B-spline curve, and this time I'm going to do it by points. And I can type here PT1 since I know the names of my features, and I can hit enter. And I can create a copy and instead of being PT1 it's going to be PT2. Enter. And let's rename our two curves that we create here. So this is going to be BSC1 and BSC2. Okay. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to place points along this curve, so and those are the ones that I'm going to use for replicate my component. So first thing that I'm going to do is change the visibility of the first 2 points that I create. I want to hide them so we can have more control. We can see exactly the things that we're doing with the other points and we don't get confused. So let's go to create new feature and let's do a point. But this time I want to show how to do it by spacing a long curve. So this is very nice. Instead of using the t-value, I can, using this method, all the spacing along the curve is going to be equal. So the distance between the 2 points, all the points that are replicated along this curve is going to be the same all the time. So the curve that I'm going to do it first is BSC1, since I know the name of my features, and spacing I'm going to type something different here. So the spacing I have to do BS1, and I'm going to use, is BSC1, and I'm going to use a property from my feature. If I hit dot, you're going to see that GC shows all the properties from my element. So the property that I'm going to use is called total length. So I can just type T and total length. And I'm going to multiply it 0, 1. So this means that the separation between the points is going to be the total length of my curve multiplied divided by 100. So let's hit OK. Arc length, and let's hit OK. So I have all these points, which I think there were too many. So let's go here and change it. So instead of 0.1, let's do 0.02. Let's choose arc length as well, and let's hit apply. That looks better. And so for doing the fast way, for the next curve, let's just create a copy. And let's change our curve. Instead of being BCS1, we're gonna use BCS2. Let's hit OK. And the spacing value is gonna be the same thing that we use, but we're gonna do it in BCS2, is the second curve. So I'm dividing the curve. Arc length, and let's hit OK. Nice. So in this way I have my points along the curve, and the separation between them are exactly the same all the way along, all the way in the curve. So doing it by this way, I can create a variable that I'm going to call it factor, and I'm going to use this variable to multiply the separation of the points. So I'm just going to do it between 0 and 1. So I'm going to log the value here. The minimum is going to be 0.01. I always want to have something. I'm going to go every 0.01 units, and the maximum is going to be 0.5. Okay, so let's save our transaction. So if I edit these points, and instead of having this value, I can change this for factor, which is the name of the variable that I create. I have to select the same, and let's edit point of our second point in the same way. And let's hit apply. Okay, so now if we go here into our variable and we change the value, we can still control how many points we have, if we want more or we want less, right? So this is another way to populate one component, to add some points along a curve. And the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to use these points to add an index in each position. So I'm going to add a number to all of these ones. This is going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the reason that I'm doing that is because working between GC and Excel, if we want to control, if we want to know exactly which component are we working on, this is a very nicely way to do it, because we can exactly know which number is going to be in our Excel sheet and each component it is. So the first thing that I'm going to do for doing that is, let's save our transaction, and I'm going to create a text style. So I go to create new feature, and let's do text style. Here by define format, the height I'm just gonna 2, 2, and I'm gonna call it TX. And I hit the color text, let's use 4, and let's hit OK. Here you can change more things. You can change the font, you can justify the text. So it's a very nice way to add text in GC. So apparently nothing happened, but the only thing that we create is our text style. So now that we're gonna add the text, it's gonna work. We're gonna use that text style. So let's go to create feature, and let's create a text. And we're gonna do it by point or plane or coordinate system. So the placement is gonna be the 0.01 and the 0.02. So let's start with the 0.01, and the text value, and the value that I'm gonna use for the text value, I'm gonna use the function series to create a series of numbers between 0 and all the count of all the point of 1. So I'm gonna use point of 1 that count, and just can select enter, and I'm gonna do it every 1 unit, and I'm gonna hit OK. Our text style, we're gonna use TX. I'm gonna hit OK. So now we can see that we numerate all our points. This reason that I use the series, the function series, is because the position of each point is always going to match with how many points we have. So in this way, we can see that when we populate our component using these points, we're gonna know in a very easy way that the component number 4 is here, the 5 is there, the 6 is there. So we can have a very good control of what we're doing. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same thing in the other points, but since I started here since I already have one series of numbers between 0 and 24, which is a dynamic value. If I have more points, this value is going to automatically be updated. I'm going to start the enumeration of the second points right after the position of how many points I have in the other point. So let's create a copy here in this text, and let's change the placement. Is going to be 0.02, and for the text value, for the value of this text, I'm gonna type something different here. So I want to start in the quantity of how many points I have in point of 1. So I'm gonna use 0.01 that count plus the series of numbers between 0 and 0.02 count every 1 unit. So I'm gonna hit OK. The text style is the same, and I'm gonna hit OK. So now you can see that in the first curve I have the numbers between 0 and 24, and in the second curve I have the values between 25 and 49. So in this way, each of our components is going to be it's going to have a number, an ID number, which we can use and completely control what we're doing with our components. So the next thing that I'm going to do for this part of the tutorial is populate our components. So let's save our transaction, and the next thing that I'm going to do is populate a component. So my component is already loaded. If you don't know how to load a component, you have to go Tools, sorry, it's in Utilities, and you have to go to Manage Feature Types and Loaded Assemblies. So here, if you hit and select Precompiled Assembly or DDL, if you hit here, you can see that here should be the component that you create. So you can load it here. Mine is already loaded. So the only thing that you have to do is select the component, hit Open, and hit Load It. But since mine is already loaded, I'm not going to do it. But that's the way how you can load a component in GC. No. So let's go to our component, and I'm going to do it just by default. It's going to ask me for a base yes. As always, it's going to be base yes. Okay. Base point, I'm going to use point of 1. I can select it from the symbolic diagram for my view, or I can type the name. H, for my height variable, I didn't create none of them now, so I just have to type a random number. So let's just type 30. And it's going to be the same thing for the next two values, 5 and 5. And let's hit OK. So now we have our components. and let's create a copy. And for this one, the only thing that we're gonna change is the position. So instead of being populated using the point of 1, we're gonna use the point of 2, and we're gonna hit OK. So now we have our 2 components populated, and we're almost ready to start working with in GC and Excel. So the next thing that I'm going to do is to show you how to load the GC, the Excel feature in GC, since it's not loaded automatically. So you have to go Utilities, Manage Feature Types, Loaded Assemblies, and you have to go to select precompiled assemble file, sorry, and the location of that file is in wherever be your program files x86. Usually is in the local disk C. You go there, then you find your Bentley GC version. I have a lot of them, but I'm working in 260. I'm assuming that all of you are. So just go to the folder, and then go to Generative Components, then go to Assemblies, and the name of that one is Bentley Generative Components Office. So you have to select Open and load it. I have already loaded, so I'm not going to do it. No, I don't want to. Okay, so that's the last part for this tutorial, and in the last part of this tutorial I'm gonna show how to link this file with Excel. So thank you.